I have a confession. Many longtime fans may be upset about what I'm about to say. As you may already know, I like video games and I like anime. However, I've made a fatal mistake in my judgment. You see, I like Sword Art Online. Yes, you heard that right. Furthermore, I like the Sword Art Online video games. I know, judge me however you want. I know I've sinned in the eyes of many. But what's so wrong with that? Really though, hear me out. They are not bad games. They're really not. I have played all of the Sword Art Online games, at least that have been released in the West. I didn't really enjoy the mobile games, but I did enjoy the console games. Hollow Fragment was really enjoyable and had a lot of content and ways to play the game. Lost Song had an amazing post-game. Hollow Realization took what made Hollow Fragment great and expanded on it in innovative ways. Excel World vs Sword Art Online was not good. Thank you for understanding. Fatal Bullet is probably the best Sword Art Online game in general, featuring tons of content, great polish, fun movement, and more. Alicization Lycoris was okay. It had a huge story, but uninteresting combat and poor exploration. Last Recollection was similar, but it felt even lazier. It seemed that the Sword Art Online game series was not doing the best. This is until a random direct earlier this year happened where Bandai Namco announced Sword Art Online Fracture Daydream, developed by Dimps. I began looking forward to this game because Dimps did an awesome job with Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet. Seeing this cool looking multiplayer game featuring areas and bosses from Sword Art Online that we almost never got to really fight in any of the SAO games previously is seriously awesome. I had a lot of faith in Dimps to create a product that is fun to play and can take the SAO games to the next level. Admittedly, I didn't pay much attention to any released information about the game until months later, when I saw that they announced an open beta test, so I figured I might as well check it out. After waiting, they finally released the open beta for 2 days, and I have determined how I feel about the game in its present state. I will be talking about my thoughts on this open beta and comparing it to the other Sword Art Online games and talk about the game's final release a little bit. I'm glad that Sword Art Online Fracture Daydream held an open beta test because it ended up answering a ton of concerns that I had going into it. The beta test featured 9 playable characters: Kirito, Asuna, Egil, Argo, Len, Sinon, Fukazero, Oberon, and Lifa. These characters were split between 6 different roles that effectively did different things. Each character played pretty uniquely from one another, which surprised me a lot. Each character had their own playstyles and unique skills and movesets. They also used varying weapons and had different gameplay types. There's melee combat, gun combat, and aerial combat. Melee combat feels very good, featuring normal and heavy attacks. There's skills if you hold each of them down respectively, and combo finishers. Characters appear to even have some launchers that you can use to convert combos from the ground into the air if you use the right inputs. I wish that the combat skills for melee combat would push you forward a little towards your target when using them, because I feel like there's a lot of instances where I use my skill and I just miss and have to wait for the animation to finish, or the enemy moves back a tiny bit before or mid-skill and it just kinda misses the rest. That said, I didn't run into this super often, so it's more of a nitpick. The gun combat feels one-to-one identical to Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet. After all, it's developed by the same team. That said, the combat in Fatal Bullet felt really good, and I think it works as good in that game as it does here. I would argue that the gunplay feels more polished as well. Each gun style character has their main weapon and pistols that you can switch to. You can also melee enemies too, and I think it covers those situations more efficiently. Whereas I feel like using a pistol isn't usually worth it. Though I think it's cool to have as an option. The last combat style is aerial combat. Characters like Lifa and Oberon have wings which allow you to fly during combat. Otherwise, they play identically to the melee combat style. You can fly and hover in the air, move around, ascend and descend, or enter an aerial boost mode where you fly at high speeds throughout the air. Flying does consume a flight meter, so you can't permanently do this. I noticed my problem with melee combat not pushing you toward the enemy is amplified in the air, where it can be difficult to constantly hit enemies sometimes. I think this is my only problem with combat, and really, it's not all that major. Enemies have weak points, so generally you want to fly to that weak point and hit it as often as you can. Since enemies have weak points, this also means that characters with guns can effectively and consistently shoot for those weak points to maximize their damage output. Each character additionally has their own charging rage meter or gimmick. After this meter is full, you can use it to increase the character's skill regeneration rate or cause other effects depending on the character. For example, Sinon charges strong bullets over time, which can be used to deal large amounts of damage. Additionally, Oberon can summon an Archer Knight to shoot at enemies. Most characters usually buff their attacks in some way though. The last piece of combat is that each character has an ultimate skill that has a long cooldown. These vary character to character and are usually very strong attacks. Each character's weapon has their own element, but you can change weapons per character that has different elements to change them. Conversely, each enemy generally has an element that they're weak to. Every character besides characters who use guns have the ability to block and dodge attacks. Everyone can also sprint. This game does have perfect guarding and perfect dodging mechanics, guarding capable of reducing received damage, and dodging capable of giving invincibility frames and moving away. The timing for perfect guards and perfect dodges is quite slim compared to other games like Granblue Fantasy Reeling. The timing is so much more strict and can even be more punishing. The reward for perfect guarding can stagger who hit you depending on the enemy and attack type. The reward for perfect dodging recovers a small amount of health. Now, you may think that this isn't very good, but I'll come back to this later and you will see that there's actually a lot of great benefits. In my opinion, all of the characters feel pretty good. I was pretty surprised that each character really played differently, so if you like a certain playstyle, you can probably attribute that to a certain character. For example, I really like how Argo played. She had a very fast playstyle that could get you in and out quickly while dealing lots of damage. Also, I don't usually like how tanks play or how slow they feel in most games, but I had a surprising amount of fun playing as Egil. Don't forget about Oberon and his, goofy looking sprinting animation. I feel like I am struggling to pick a favorite character out of the beta due to just how good and different they all feel from one another. So I'm very interested to see how the additional characters in the full game feel and play. I spent about 2/3 of my time farming the 2 boss raids that were available. The other third of my time was spent doing the co-op quests. The 2 boss raids that were available was a fight with the Sword Golem and the Skull Reaper. I'll explain how these boss raids work. You team up with 5 parties of 4 people, accumulating 20 people to fight one raid boss. The boss would cause enemies to spawn per occasion and be pushed into different phases as his health gets reduced. You work as a group to inflict breaks, perform switches to deal massive damage to the boss, and in the end defeat it. During this fight, there are also opportunities to deal counters. When the boss is about to do a large devastating attack, players can go to a certain highlighted spot on the map to counter it, preventing players from getting hurt. If enough players counter during this time successfully, you can deal additional damage. I found these raid bosses to be really fun working with an additional 19 people to defeat these massive bosses. During this fight, there are additional side objectives that can show up. These objectives contribute to your party score rankings, which are scores determined by how well you and your party are performing. It is kind of a score battle to see which team gets the MVP reward at the end of the match. There is also a last hit award. In the beta, the awards reward the player with additional experience for their character and player ranks. There are also co-op quests. The co-op quests have the same party system, 5 parties of 4 people with 20 total. Your party goes through a series of missions, and once they're all completed, you go to a map containing every player where all players must complete a series of missions together. After all of these objectives are completed, everyone goes to a final area where you fight a boss. The same party score battle exists here as well. Something very unique that I found about these missions that gave it a really nice feeling was the progression. Every time you start a mission, your level is at 1. By you and your party defeating enemies, you can gain experience to level up. Leveling up increases your attack and health. Additionally, orbs that increase your attack and max health are dropped by defeated enemies as well, raising those stats by small amounts. Throughout your time clearing the objectives in both of these game modes, perks will drop of varying rarities that you can pick up that will do things ranging from increasing your critical damage by 5% to increasing your movement speed by 30% to even increasing your crit rate by up to 50% if you're lucky. That's a lot. These are all reset at the end of the mission, meaning that you can go into the boss under-leveled, over-leveled, under or over-prepared. It makes especially co-op quests really interesting to play. You unlock access to another skill every 3 levels that you level up until they're all unlocked, allowing you to pick one to unlock each time. It kinda gives this roguelike-ish vibe, and honestly, I could get behind seeing more of this in the game in some ways. Now, you may be wondering, is there any real sense of progression here if the stats are reset going into each mission? Well, yes. Let's talk about the rewards you can get from these battles. In the open beta, we don't quite have a completely clear picture on how the progression of the game will work, however, we do have a good look at what some of the rewards look like. Completing mission gives everyone the same rarities of loot that drop from the sky. Players pick them up. If a player picks up a legendary rarity loot item, that specific player will have a chance to earn an additional cosmetic reward for their character depending on what cosmetics the mission drops. Otherwise, everyone shares identical rewards. After completing the battle and after the results screen, you can enter an appraisal screen where you can appraise your rewards and see what you specifically got. There are 5 different rarities ranging from common to legendary. The items you can receive are weapons and accessories that you can equip onto characters. Each character is capable of equipping 3 accessories and changing their weapon out. I must specify that changing your weapon does not change the character's gameplay. Each weapon and accessory you get has their own randomly generated stats and varying levels of that. Each item also has its own rank, and the rank of the item determines the base stats of the item. The rarest items of legendary rarity also have a random effect on them. These are usually very good stats in one way or another. I have seen these range from giving your dash the ability to deal damage, to giving good buff effects after hitting perfect guards or perfect dodges. I mentioned earlier in the video that you may be under the impression that perfect guarding or perfect dodging is not really worth it, but I believe if you have a good set of legendary accessories, it can prove to be extremely worthwhile. Some additional buffs from legendary items can be increasing specific skill damage rates, changing elements and buffing that element. There seems to be a ton of effects that these legendary items can give. I have a feeling that maxing and getting a perfect set of gear might be quite a grind. However, again, I don't know enough about the progression of the game due to the beta locking a lot of features, but if I do recall correctly at least, weapons will be upgradable, so I imagine accessories would be as well. The former statement is partially speculation, but I do have faith that the developers will have a good system in place, but we will just have to wait and see. The last piece of equipment is cosmetics. Characters can equip multiple cosmetics for outfits or accessories like hats, tails, and other things. Certain missions are capable of dropping certain cosmetics as rare drops. Each mission has a different cosmetic that can show up. I mentioned previously that in order to obtain it, you must personally collect a legendary dropped item to have a chance to obtain it. This is the only non-shared accessory. That said, the stats and specific items aren't shared either, just the rarities. I saw a lot of people confused on this, claiming that people were stealing regular rewards, but this isn't really true. The last reward you can earn, as far as I know, is coal, which is the game's currency. The open beta had a few more things available in it, including the ability to add friends, decorate your profile card, and badges. Prior to matchmaking, you could also favorite a character so that you could get into a party that is less likely to have someone with that character favorited so that you can play as your preferred character. Also, on that note, it is worth mentioning that only one person in your party can play as one character, but when there's going to be over 20 characters at launch, I don't really think that this is going to end up being a problem for the 4-person parties, especially thanks to that favorite system. There was also a passive skill menu for characters' equipment, but we were unable to adjust them. There's a player rank and a per character rank. The open beta's player rank was capped at 15, and I don't think there was a character rank cap. I saw that people got as high as level 30. The player rank determines the rank the items you earn from missions is. The character rank gives a base stat buffs to that specific character that you've ranked up. You can also unlock weapon skins for that character through this. Given that this is a social-oriented game with a major focus on online gameplay, the emphasis on skins and cosmetics makes sense. Do not forget though that this game will have solo and single player content, so if you aren't really interested in the online or live service aspects, there will be alternative content. So with all of that in mind, here's what I accomplished during my time playing the beta. I put in 26 hours during the 48-hour-ish time that the beta was available. The badges available in the beta were based on the amount of times you played as certain characters, at intervals of 10, 50, and 100. I obtained the 10 play count badge for all 9 of the available characters. I managed to collect every rare collectible cosmetic besides one. There were a total of 5 available in the open beta. I obtained a ton of legendary items and amassed over 118,000 coal by the end of my time playing. I like to think that I've seen a lot about what the open beta had to offer. That said, I'm sure I've missed some things, but let's just talk about what I think relating to everything that I just spoke about in this beta. I have played every Sword Art Online game before, and after having a bit of a complicated relationship with these games full of ups and downs, I have been super skeptical of Sword Art Online Fractured Daydream. Now, to preface, this does not speak for the final game, neither my thoughts nor how this beta works, but it has given us a good glimpse on how it will be. I am very positive about how I feel about the open beta. I found that the characters were very enjoyable and all felt really unique from one another. Any problems about each character specifically that I might have really are just nitpicks or skill issues. No character felt like another one in terms of how they play. Sure, maybe a little similar, but the most identical thing that I found was their role in combat, which makes sense when the game split into 6 different character roles. As I mentioned, I am excited to see how the rest of the characters play when the game officially launches. Now, let's talk about the modes present in the beta. We had the boss raid mode, co-op quest, and we also had a tutorial mission. I assume the tutorial mission will play a little more like some of how the story missions might in some instances, which the tutorial still felt fun enough, but you know, it's a tutorial, it's not like it's supposed to be the most thrilling thing on the planet. The co-op quests felt awesome. I like the 3 segments that it's split into. The first part seems to vary as well between a few different objectives and maps, which makes it really refreshing if you're repeatedly playing it. The objectives were fun, and the whole concept of having the options to go out of your way to level up more or get better perks if you want to is also really nice. Sometimes the party you're in would go out of their way, sometimes they wouldn't, but always it would change how the game felt. It is easy to tell in the second part whether you are underleveled or not, and there's still opportunities to level up there amidst objectives. It felt really nice to fight normal enemies and working closer with your own party members and staying as a group, which is very different from the big raid bosses with 19 other people. The second segment is pretty fun, maybe a little more chaotic with increased difficulty, but it's really not bad. I did notice one problem during these segments relating to movement. When you're running around the environment and fall off of a cliff, you kinda get stuck on the ground in weird ways. It's a weird problem, but it's not the be all and end all. I hope that the developers do fix it, however. Your party spawns at different points each time, and all players work towards 3 large objectives. Upon completing these objectives with everyone, you go to the third segment, which is a boss fight. Specifically in the beta, it was a fight against Ilfeng the Kobold Lord. I feel like the bosses in this beta were a little easy. I had no issues at all against Ilfeng, and I never really had any huge issues against the Sword Golem or Skull Reaper either, outside of the Sword Golem running away from me. I hope that there are more difficulty options in the final game. I noticed that there was something called World Tiers for missions, the open beta sitting at level 1. So I assume there's ways to increase the world tier level and have it increase the difficulty of the mission? That's just speculation, but I would hope that there is greater difficulty for people who want greater challenges. On the note of challenges and difficulty, during the open beta, you are able to respawn infinitely if you die during combat, meaning it was impossible to really fail a mission. I hope that this is not the case in the final game and that there are ways to get eliminated from the match. The bosses themselves were very enjoyable though. The boss raid missions were great, and I love the element of having a performance-based score battle with other parties as you played through the various objectives to earn score bonuses. Some of the objectives included dealing the most damage to the weak point before the boss loses that bar of health, and other concepts similar to that. I thought this was great. While you're all working for the same objectives, and in the end really you do get the same rewards, but there's still that sense of friendly competition to outscore the other parties. As a result, it makes a lot of these raids really fun. There's also strategies to go after enemies to gain more experience so you level up to deal more damage so that you can increase your odds of being the best party earning the MVP reward. I usually went for those strategies when I played when I was able to. This leveling system is such a cool thing in this game because of the options that you can do with it, going for levels or just straight going for the objective fighting the boss. Alright, moving on. I could talk about these raids for a while, but they really are a lot of fun. The equipment systems are very interesting with how all of the stats work. I am, though, a little worried about the final release that progression may be hindered due to the odd equipment systems and nuances. I can't really say for certain how it will be. I think that there can be a lot of room for error here, but I know in the main menu there was a system that you can use with A-Guild to inspect equipment. In that menu, a lot of features were unavailable, but I am sure that there will be more to it in those menus when the game releases. I fear that the grind for good equipment might be a little weird, but I think it's for that same reason that it may be good. I know, what I'm saying is a little conflicting, but I have always really liked the sense of progression in the previous SAO games and the weird way some of them handle equipment upgrading. So if the trend is anything to go off of, I don't think it'll be awful. I just think it'll be different compared to something like a gacha game where this kind of stuff is more traditional. The social aspects of customizing your profile and badges and stuff are simple but easy and silly, so that's really cool to have. All in all though, I don't think that there's much else for me to talk about other than the fact that my overall consensus is pretty overwhelmingly positive. I have a few concerns, being that melee combat skills don't push you towards your target and that walking down slopes has really weird behavior, and hopefully these do get fixed or adjusted, but we'll have to see. After the open beta, I felt strongly enough to purchase the Sword Art Online Fractured Daydream Premium Edition. Now, something that has been confirmed is that the game will contain microtransactions and will have additional content updates, DLC, and events. However, I do believe that no microtransactions will be used for anything advantageous. And if it's anything like Sword Art Online Alicization Licorice, another paid SAO game that had microtransactions, these would just be spent on cosmetics in the game with ways to earn this currency through normal play. Again, this is just speculation, so I can't really confirm anything. That said, I think that this move makes sense for it given that it's kind of a live service game. I hope that this game gets DLC and updates for a while to add new content because I can see myself playing this game for a long time if they do. Already, they confirmed that they would be adding Straya from Sword Art Online Hollow Fragment into the game during Season 1 of Fractured Daydream, which will begin when the game launches. She will be paid DLC, but if you buy the deluxe editions, I do believe that she is included. They also plan to add Pito Hui and M from the Sword Art Online Alternative Gun Gale Online spin-off to the game as the second DLC. I think that this is really cool, and I do hope that they continue to release characters. I would love to see more of the characters from the other SAO games especially included in this game at some point. However, I suppose we will see in due time. Now with all of this in mind, do I recommend you buy the game? If you're a Sword Art Online fan, absolutely. If you like the other SAO games, absolutely. If you liked Grand Blue Fantasy Relink and think you would like this, sure, definitely. If you're looking for a multiplayer anime game, certainly. If you are unsure or don't fall into these categories, it is hard to say if this game is for you. It is a little similar to Grand Blue Fantasy Relink and can be compared a little bit to gacha games, so if any of this does sound appealing, I might recommend the Standard Edition. If you're still on the fence about it, I'm certain that this game will get enough updates over time where you can get it on a sale or look at reviews post-launch. Thank you for watching this video. If you are interested in more content like this on Sword Art Online Fractured Daydream, then please let me know. I will be playing a lot of it upon release, so I would love to make content for it if people are interested. Subscribe and like if you enjoyed this video. I plan to upload a bunch of stuff to this channel. I will also be live streaming this game on Twitch when it releases, so check that out if you are interested.